Who are you?
The one you knew before you forgot.
If only they knew why her only son, the billionaire prince, fell in love with this homeless blind girl and brought her home to her mother, a woman of class. The great queen mother, a woman known for great personality and whose aura exudes and smells class. If only they knew why her only son, the billionaire prince, heir to a mighty throne, beloved by the people, sought after by the noble daughters of 7 kingdoms, would disgrace the palace by falling in love with a homeless, blind girl. The blind girl had no name known to the court, no lineage, no dowry, no future. Yet one morning, with the wind still damp from the night's rain, he brought her through the golden palace gates, barefoot, silent, with only the soft rustle of her patchwork dress and the echo of her unseen steps behind him. He introduced her as his bride. Not his guest. Not a servant. His chosen. His future queen. Gasps filled the royal hall like wind through shattered glass. Has the prince lost his mind? A blind beggar? In the queen's court? Is this a joke? A punishment? The nobles whispered behind their silks. The servants exchanged glances in terror. The high council begged him to reconsider. Even the king himself, a man carved from years of war and pride, stood frozen, unable to speak. But the prince only smiled. Because he remembered. He remembered the first time he saw her. It wasn't in the light of chandeliers or in the gardens of the palace where roses bloomed like velvet fire. It was at the eastern gate, where no noble dared to walk, where the cobblestones were cracked and weeds grew wild between market stalls. It was there, one dusk, as the sky wept golden blood, that he saw her. Alone. Blind. Smiling. She sat by the marble fountain that hadn't worked in years, where children once tossed coins and whispered wishes, now forgotten. Her hands folded in her lap. Her face turned slightly to the heavens. Eyes clouded white. Dress torn at the hem. No shoes. No protection. No fear. Only that smile. That smile was not for show. It was the kind of smile that hurt. The kind that made you feel the weight of all your buried sorrow and hidden hope. The kind that made time stop for just a moment, and asked you without words, do you remember who you are? He couldn't walk away. Not the first time. Not the next. Not ever. For weeks, he watched her. Rain or shine, she sat in the same place, never begging, never speaking. The merchants called her the girl who smiled at ghosts. Children whispered stories that she could see what others couldn't. Some claimed she was cursed. Others said she had once been a princess herself. But he saw something else. He saw the mystery. Not in her eyes, but in what lay behind them. He saw peace in her stillness, grace in her silence, and a memory in her smile that seemed too old for someone so young. Then one day, on the eve of his coronation, he approached her. No guards. No crown. Just a man with questions. And she, without turning her face, said, "You came later than I thought, but still, you came." He didn't know how she recognized him. He never told her who he was. But she knew. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in her, but in him. He knelt before her, a prince before a pauper, and whispered, "Who are you?" She smiled, again, that deep, haunting, beautiful smile, and replied,
"Who are you?"
"The one you knew before you forgot." That
The one you knew
the winds
before
howled
you
like
forgot.
voices long buried. That night, the moon hid behind clouds, as if watching in reverence. And the prince, burdened by titles and trapped by gold, made a choice. He would bring her home. He didn't care if the kingdom rioted. He didn't care if his reputation shattered. Because something inside her told the truth. Not the kind written in scrolls or shouted from pulpits. but the kind whispered by God when he's too close to deny. And so, when the palace gates opened, and the blind girl walked in beside him, the world watched in horror. But the prince walked in peace. Because only he knew the mystery behind the girl. And what she truly carried. Not a curse. Not poverty. But a secret, divine and ancient. A secret about who she really was. And why the heavens would rather blind her, than let the world see her too soon. They used to say Prince Zen of Zulli was not just born, he was carved from the stories of old. Tall, handsome like the ones in fairy tales, with golden hair that caught sunlight like fire. His smile could confuse even a wise queen, and his strength in battle made older warriors nod with respect. From outside, everything about him looked perfect, like he was made for the throne. But inside, Prince Zen was tired. He was tired of fake smiles, endless feasts, and the sound of his name being used to win favors. The palace was beautiful but suffocating. The chandeliers shined, but they hung like chains. The halls echoed with lies dressed in expensive perfume. To make matters worse, the court had already arranged a bride for him, Lady Moore. She was fine like morning sun, and she knew it. Intelligent, yes, but her eyes were full of power and plans, not love. She walked like someone who wanted to rule, not to feel. But Zen didn't want just any bride. He wanted peace. He wanted truth. Something real, something that wasn't touched by the throne or dressed up in royal expectations. So, many nights, while the rest of the kingdom slept, and the palace was quiet, Zen would dress in black, climb his horse, and ride through the villages. No guards. No crown. Just silence. That night, the sky broke. Heavy rain began to fall, the kind that soaks you to your bones. But Zen didn't mind. In fact, he welcomed it. Something about rain made him feel human. As if God himself was washing off the weight of being royal. He was about to turn back when he reached the eastern gate of Zulli. That was when he saw her. She was sitting on the edge of the old marble fountain, head tilted slightly upwards, rain pouring down on her like she didn't even notice. She was blind. Her eyes didn't move. She didn't blink against the rain. But her face was smiling. Not a loud or showy smile. But the kind of smile that made you stop and wonder. Zen pulled his horse closer and slowly stepped down. His boots splashed into the muddy water as he walked toward her. No one else was out. Just him, and this strange girl who looked like she was smiling at heaven. She didn't flinch as he came near. And that surprised him. People always noticed a prince, even in disguise. But she didn't. She just sat there, soaked, like the rain was telling her stories. Then Zen spoke. Quietly. Why do you smile in the rain? The girl tilted her head slightly, and for a second, Zen thought she hadn't heard him. But then she spoke, her voice soft, almost like a song. Because I've never seen it. But I imagine it must be beautiful. That one sentence shook something in him. He stared at her. Not just with his eyes, but with his spirit. She was blind. She had never seen rain. Never seen the sky, the clouds, or even her own reflection. But still, she smiled at what she could not see, believing it was beautiful. And in that moment, the prince fell in love. Not with her face. Not with her body. But with something the palace had never given him. Hope. He didn't even know her name yet. But he knew this. She was different. And he needed different. When Zen brought Alina into the palace, soaked, barefoot, and blind, the kingdom lost its breath. The queen mother nearly fainted. You bring a beggar girl into my marble halls, she thundered. What enchantment is this? Nobles sneered. Daughters of dukes hissed behind silk fans. Rumors flew like daggers. She is a witch. She has bewitched the prince. But Zen saw none of it. He saw her fingers on the palace harpsichord, learning sound through touch. He read poetry to her in candlelight. He taught her the scent of flowers, the meaning of colors, how to dance by counting steps. And Alina, blind and gentle, gave him a love that made war-hardened men weep. She touched his face like it was a prayer, held him when nightmares woke him, whispered truths no one dared tell him. You don't have to be perfect, Zen. Just real. He kissed her eyes and said, if you could see what I see when I look at you, you would never doubt again. The court grew darker with envy. Where once they whispered behind fans and pillars, now they spat openly. Lady Moore, once promised to the prince, let the venom. She's not blind, she's cunning, Moore hissed. She's cast a spell over him. The nobles hatched schemes to shame Alina. They invited her to banquets where the chairs were moved so she'd stumble. They handed her poisoned goblets hoping she'd take the first sip. They filled corridors with tripwires and silk thread traps. Alina endured it all. She never asked for pity. Never retaliated. Each time they laughed, she stood up, brushed her skirt, and smiled with those sightless eyes. I may not see with my eyes, she said gently, but I know when hearts are unkind. Her words echoed, silencing even the boldest knights for a moment. But the cruelty didn't end. That afternoon, the palace garden was full of life. Trumpets and violins played softly in the background. The sun was kind, casting golden light over the marble paths and colorful roses. Nobles and ladies dressed in their best lace and silk were walking about, sipping wine, gossiping, laughing fake laughs, and pretending to be holy. But even with all the beauty around, all eyes were secretly watching one person, the girl who didn't belong. Alina. The blind girl the prince brought home. Some called her mad. Some said she used witchcraft. Others just hated how calm and quiet she was. She was sitting by the fountain that day, her hands folded gently on her lap. She wasn't smiling like she used to. Maybe she had started sensing how unwanted she was in the palace. Then came Sir Doreen. A young knight. Proud. Arrogant. The type that drinks too much and talks too loud. Wine was still fresh on his breath as he staggered into the garden, trying to impress some noble ladies nearby. He walked up to Alina and scoffed. Blind girl, he said, loud enough for people to hear. Can you feel honor? Can you feel shame? People chuckled nervously. Some turned away. But he didn't stop there. Sir Doreen leaned in and reached for her hand, like she was an object, not a human being. That was when it happened. Nobody saw the prince coming. Just like wind, Zen appeared in a flash of royal blue and silver steel. His fist landed on Doreen's face like thunder. The knight flew backwards, rolled into the rose bushes, and came out with blood on his lip and shame on his face. The garden went silent. Even the birds paused mid-song. Zen's voice, cold and fierce, cut through the air. Touch her again, and I will drop this crown. I swear it, on my father's grave. You could feel the weight of his words. Everyone froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the Queen Mother, watching from the balcony, closed her fan and turned her eyes away. Then, quietly and with dignity, Zen reached for Alina's trembling hand. She stood, unsure, but trusting. He didn't say a word. He simply walked with her, past the nobles, past the judgmental eyes and fake smiles, and led her out of the garden like a king leading a queen. Heads bowed. No one dared look up. That night, while the palace burned with whispers and gossip, Zen sat in his private tower with Alina. A single candle lit the room. The night wind danced through the open window. Zen knelt before her. A prince, brought low, not by shame, but by love. He held her hands gently, as if they were something holy. Let them curse me, he said, his voice shaking. Let them call me foolish, blind, stupid. I don't care anymore. He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. I'd rather beg on the streets with you than sit on a throne beside someone I don't love." Alina didn't speak. She just leaned forward, rested her forehead on his, and for the first time since he met her, a tear slipped down her cheek. A silent answer. But enough. Nobody expected anything strange that morning. The sky was clear, the palace bustled like usual, and the royal guards stood tall like carved statues. But deep inside the oldest part of the palace library, where dust slept on books and silence hummed like a song, Aaron the keeper, the palace sage, made a discovery that would shake the entire kingdom. Aaron, an old man whose beard almost touched the floor, and whose eyes had seen more than 3 kings come and go, stumbled on a hidden compartment beneath the cracked stone shelf. Inside, wrapped in old linen and sealed with wax, was an ancient scroll. The scroll was old, older than Zulli itself, but the writing was still clear, golden ink preserved by salt and silent prayers. He opened it with trembling hands and read aloud in the Hall of Wisdom. His voice echoed off the marble walls as nobles, guards, and servants gathered around. "A child born of eyes that do not see shall one day rule with a heart that feels all. The bearer of light shall be hidden in the dark until love brings her forth." A strange silence fell. You could almost hear hearts beating. People glanced at one another. Then someone whispered, then another, until the whole room turned and looked at Alina. Alina, the blind girl. The beggar girl. The one the prince brought home from the eastern gate. The one they called cursed, useless, and strange. The one who always smiled even when it rained. Could it be? Some people shouted blasphemy. Others crossed themselves or clutched their beads. A few fell to their knees, unsure if they should worship or run. But Prince Zen didn't flinch. He stepped forward, stood right behind Alina, and placed his 2 strong hands on her shoulders. His eyes scanned the crowd, bold and daring, saying without words, "If any of you speak against her, you speak against me." Alina said nothing for a long moment. Then, in a soft voice that trembled like candlelight, she said, "I do not want to rule. I only want to love." But from that moment, fate had already chosen her. Not long after that prophecy was read, people began to notice something else. Alina's belly was growing. At first, it was whispers between palace maids. Then, it became a storm of gossip across the kingdom. From the gold-plated halls of the nobles to the sweaty marketplace where meat sellers shouted prices, everyone was talking. "She's pregnant. By the prince. How can that be? She carries a crown she cannot even see. The end of Zulli is near." Some even claimed Zen was under a spell, bewitched by her blindness. Others said the child was cursed. Some nobles started planning secret meetings. They wanted to convince the king's council that Zen was unfit to rule. But the prince? Zen only loved her louder. He walked beside her with pride, held her hand in front of the court. When the elders frowned, he looked them in the eye. And whenever Alina looked unsure or afraid, Zen would whisper, "They fear what they don't understand. You were born blind, to see what they never will. Your love gives me courage." He moved her to the highest tower in the eastern wing, where the windows opened wide, and the sunlight poured in like honey. The air smelled of lavender, and the sound of birds singing filled the morning breeze. Every evening, when the palace grew quiet and the sky turned orange, Zen would sit by her side with a harp. He played soft songs, telling stories through music, not to her alone, but to the child growing inside her. And at night, he would kneel beside her belly and whisper, "You will know love before sight, and truth before gold. You are made of moonlight and miracles." For the first time in her life, Alina cried. But not because of pain. Not because of shame. Not even because of fear. She cried because someone finally saw her, not as a burden, not as a beggar, not as a mistake, but as a miracle. Someone who had everything to lose, chose to love her, completely and without apology. The night Alina went into labor, the sky opened wide, like a heart that could no longer hold back its tears. Rain didn't just fall. It poured heavily, like buckets being emptied from heaven. Thunder roared across the skies, and lightning flashed so brightly it looked like the heavens were being torn apart.
It's all right, I'm here. My lady, you must push. Push now.
Inside the palace, everyone was afraid. The windows shook. Some shattered. Horses neighed wildly in their stables. Servants whispered that something was not right. But in the tall tower of the eastern wing, Alina was in labor. She was not crying out from pain alone. No, it was something deeper, something stronger. Something sacred had begun to happen. The old midwife, who had helped many queens give birth before, stood still with wide eyes and whispered in fear. This is not just any child. Something ancient is being born, or has returned. Prince Zen stayed by Alina's side. He had never left her, not even for a moment. He was soaked from the rain that had somehow leaked through the old roof, but he didn't care. He knelt beside her, holding her trembling, blood-stained hands, whispering soft words and promises to her as she struggled. Then, suddenly, a bright flash of light filled the whole room. It was so white, so powerful, that for a moment it felt like time had stopped. Even the thunder went silent. Alina gasped. Her chest rose and fell. She opened her eyes. And this time, she saw. For the first time in her life, Alina could see clearly. She turned her head slowly and looked at Zen, the prince who had risked everything to love her. He was kneeling beside her, wet from the storm, tears running down his face. Alina stared at him in wonder. Her voice was quiet and full of emotion. You are even more beautiful than I imagined, but not as beautiful as your heart. Then came the cry of a newborn child. A baby girl. Her skin was soft. Her cry was strong. But it was her eyes that made the midwife freeze. The child's eyes didn't look like ordinary eyes. They looked like galaxies, deep and full of light, as if all the sight Alina had never known had been passed down to her baby, and multiplied. Zen took the child gently and held her close. Then he looked at Alina and whispered, "She sees because you loved me, even when you couldn't see me." By morning, the storm had ended. But the entire kingdom was still in shock. The news spread like fire, from the palace halls to the village markets, from the priest's corner to the streets. The beggar queen can now see. The same nobles who once laughed at her, now stood speechless. As Alina walked down the grand palace stairs, the sun gently touched her face, making her glow like gold. Her hair was no longer wild, it had been brushed and tied with jasmine flowers. She wore a soft white gown. In her arms was the baby, peaceful and wrapped in royal cloth. She still had that same smile. Calm, warm, kind. But her eyes? Her eyes had changed. Now, they carried strength, power, light. They looked like someone who had seen the darkest night, and now walked fully into the morning. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I couldn't see the woman you were, but you never needed sight to see us all." Alina didn't flinch. She simply reached down, lifted her with grace only earned through suffering, and whispered back, "The heart was made to forgive. So I will." And that was how a kingdom was reborn, not through war, but through grace. At the royal court, before the nobles and generals, before scribes and peasants alike, Zen stood beside Alina with his newborn daughter in hand and declared, "From this day, no man or woman will be judged by their title, bloodline, or birth. The worth of a soul in Zulli shall be seen only through how they love, and who they lift." The nobles flinched. Some broke into tears. Others bowed, silenced by the mirror this law held to their cruelty. Years later, Princess Lyra, the beauty born by two angels, grew wise and fierce, with her mother's peace and her father's fire. She became a ruler who listened before she spoke, and judged only with the full weight of understanding. But even as the years passed, she always asked, "Papa, how did you fall in love with Mama?" And Zen would kneel beside the fountain, the one where it all began, and say, "Your mother sat in the rain with nothing, and still smiled at the stars she could not see. That smile lit my world. It was not her eyes that saw me. It was her soul." Thanks for watching. Please, remember to share our story.